All right. So, stars, planets, constellations. We've talked about planets. They look like moving stars. So, not that they go streaking across the sky. It's just that you go out every night and you keep seeing the same stars in the same orientation, and the planets tend to rearrange themselves in the sky. So, but the stars keep repeating. So you go up, you see the stars. Go out to tomorrow night, you see stars. Go out the next night, you see stars, and you keep seeing the same stars over and over again. And so the ancients got to where they named those stars. So if you go out tonight after sunset and look almost straight up, high overhead is going to be a really bright star, and that really bright star is going to be called Vega. If you look toward the south, towards a little bit towards the southwest, you see kind of a reddish star. That star is called Antares. So there's a variety of different stars that are out there, and they have names because people kept seeing the same stars over and over again. They also noticed that you had all these stars in the sky, and the human mind just likes to try to make order of random stuff. So if you go out and you see star field like that, your brain tries to make patterns out of those stars. And some of the patterns that we see go back to the ancients. And so, for example, they saw this group of stars right there as a bird, okay, and in particular a swan. Okay, so that's a big swan going across the sky. And so that swan going across the sky, that was a harp right here. That's supposed to be a harp. Okay, so that someone playing a harp. It doesn't look like a harp to me. Okay, but these were the kinds of patterns they had. So a couple of these patterns here that you familiar with maybe, three little stars in a row like that and like this. That's Orion the Hunter. And so Orion the Hunter out in the sky, and Orion is a hunter in mythology. And here he is hunting a rabbit right there. He's got a dog here coming with him. There's a big dog right here. We call it Canis Major, the big dog, and a little small dog right there, Canis Minor, the small dog. And so Orion is hunting. And according to legend, one day Orion happens to be hunting and steps on a poison scorpion. And the stinger of the scorpion stings Orion in his foot, and it's a poison scorpion, so Orion is dying. And so it turns out there's this other fella here, Ophiuchus. And Ophiuchus comes along, and for some reason he's holding a snake. So there's a long line of stars like that we call Serpens the snake. And so he distills the venom of that snake to cure Orion. Okay, now actually don't do that at home. It just kills you extra fast, but in Greek mythology, this was a legend. Now, it's a legend filled with heroics and good deeds and so forth. So there's a moral lesson behind it. It was important to the Greeks. And so what they did was a lot of people could not read and write, so they picked patterns in the sky to represent some of the key characters in the story. Okay, well, there's a couple other little footnotes to this story. The constellation Orion and the constellation Scorpius I have here drawn near each other on my slide, but really they're opposite ends of the sky, so that when Orion is setting, the Scorpion is rising. When the Scorpion is setting, then Orion is rising. So for all eternity, they chase each other across the sky. There's another story that's out there. Okay, there's another story that's kind of interesting, and that is we've got this group of stars right there. That's Cepheus the king. Okay, and we have here Andromeda. Sorry, that's not Andromeda. That's Cassiopeia the queen, and they've got this daughter, and the daughter is named Andromeda. Now, Andromeda is this beautiful princess, but she's chained up to a rock and is about to be eaten by Cetus, the sea monster. Okay. You don't have to worry about her, though, because along comes a hero by the name of Perseus. And Perseus happens to be holding at arm's length the head of the Medusa. In fact, that star right there, the Arabic name for that star is Al-Rash Al-Ghul, which means the head of the demon. And so he shows the head of the Medusa to Cepheus. Cepheus turns to stone, and together they climb on the back of Pegasus, the winged horse. And Pegasus in the sky, it looks like a big square with things hanging off of it. Okay, and so you think, wait, what were these guys thinking? You know, does this look like a king? Not really. Does that look like a queen? No. Princess? Doesn't look like a princess to me. Hero holding the head of Medusa? No. Winged horse. It's a square. No, it's not a horse with wings. But I can imagine 2,500 years ago, some guy is out, explaining all this to his kids, and the kids go, "Daddy, that's not a winged horse, it's a square." And he goes, "Be quiet. That's a horse, and it's got wings." Remember, in the ancient world, a lot of people could not read and write, and so picking patterns in the sky to represent things was how they kept track of mythology. So what happened was you ended up with these random star patterns being made into shapes. Now, I should point out what I just gave were legends from Greek mythology. Other cultures did different things. For example, in Central America, Mesoamerica, this was considered like an oven. That was an oven right there. That fuzzy thing there was a loaf of bread, and the star in between was a cook standing there cooking a loaf of bread. And so that's what this was in Central America. The stars that you look at and you see the Big Dipper, again, to the Aztecs, that was Tezcatlipoca, a jaguar. So every culture looked up and saw these things differently. And so it became kind of awkward. Different people, different cultures, different civilizations all named them differently, and they grouped them differently. Some of the constellations here, for example, that the Chinese had. They had tiger and ox and rat and monkey, things that we didn't have in Western civilization as constellations. In fact, Jupiter, the planet Jupiter, moves around the sky, takes about 12 years to go around the sky, goes through 12 Chinese constellations. So the year of the rat, the year of the monkey, year of the ox, those are the Chinese constellations that Jupiter is in that year. So that's how that ties into the Chinese calendar. So these constellations were entirely dependent on different people. Different astronomers came along and they said, well, I'm not sure where Orion ends, so I want to make a new constellation right here. And so this got to be kind of confusing, and so in the early part of the 20th century, the International Astronomical Union comes along, and they decide that we need to standardize this whole idea. And so what they did was they created a list of 88 constellations that matched up the entire sky. And instead of the constellation being a pattern in the sky, they drew boundaries and said everything inside that boundary is part of that constellation. Everything outside that boundary is part of a different constellation. And so, for example, this star right down in there, that star is inside the corner of the boundary of Orion, so that's considered part of Orion. It's not part of the picture of Orion, it's not part of the mythology, but that's no longer the constellation. The constellation has long since been disconnected from the mythology. The constellation is that boundary that is marked right there. Okay, and so on Stellarium, you can actually turn on the boundaries of the constellations and see where exactly is the boundary of each constellation. Okay, And so that's how we now see a constellation. Okay, it's no longer the other. Now, still in Stellarium, you can have it connect the dots. Okay, don't flip out if you tell it to connect the dots and it draws a stick figure that looks different than the stick figure on your planisphere, which looks different than a stick figure in a star chart that you buy, which looks different than a stick figure in like an app you download to your phone, because those stick figures are totally unofficial. The only thing that is official is the boundary. Likewise, there are different people who've drawn the figures that represent things in the sky. You know, for example, Ursa Major is a bear. You know, people have it facing one way, one people have it facing another way. I've even seen Orion facing to the right, Orion facing to the left, and sometimes Orion facing towards you. It doesn't matter. All that's unofficial. The only thing official are those boundaries. So there are 88 constellations. I have included the 88 constellations on a handout that is posted on Useful Handouts on Blackboard. They actually made the official list in 1929. They voted on it and published it in 1930. That list of 88 consists of 66 of the ancient Roman constellations, and the Romans actually borrowed 18 constellations from the Mesopotamians. So we have a variety of different things that go back that far. Okay. So the constellations, we have patterns in the sky, stick figures connecting them all, unofficial ways of drawing them, and all that's unofficial. The only thing